This week in a conversation, I have the privilege to welcome out of New York author Mario Del Olio. He's written a compelling LGBT romance novel titled Forbidding Rome. But before we get into this interesting video, I just want to remind you, everyone, please support the channel, support the effort. And the best way to do that is to subscribe to it because more and more, if you subscribe, more people subscribe to the channel, you will push us closer to the search engine. If you do subscribe to it, don't forget to click the notification bell. So that way, every time a video is posted, it'll go directly into your portable. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardan Islam, and I'm here this evening with a compelling author. I'm speaking with author Mario Del Olio, who's joining me from New York. And we're going to be talking about his LGBT romance novel titled Forbidding Rome. Mario, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Okay, but Mario, would you please tell the viewers of CSMS Magazine who is Mario Del Olio?
Well, I'm a teacher and an author. I've been teaching music as a choir director for way too long than I'd like to admit. Because that makes me sound very old, but I've been doing it for many years. And then I also teach. I teach ethics. So it's quite a combination. So, I've written at this point 4 books and more to come.
More to come, yeah, of course, yes. A writer never stops writing.
That's right.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about Forbidding Rome. Yes, interesting story, and this is the second LGBT romance that I read. Yeah, so very interesting. And the protagonist in the story is Anthony.
Yes.
And then also going off to Rome, and where he meets a lot of seminarians, just like him. But Mario, let me ask you something. One thing right off the bat, there's something in the story where Father Koenig listed off all the places in Rome that were forbidden. Okay, the Roman circus, an infamous place. Also, the area around the Colosseum and Villa Brus. All these places were supposed to be off limit for those seminarians. And one of the young ones said, you know what? Is he trying to implicitly telling us that's what's going on out there? Why did you choose that right off the bat? Is that the way you want it, and instill in the reader's mind what's coming?
Absolutely. So just a little bit about me. I actually studied in Rome to be a priest, and I still remember that actual little vignette was actually a true story. The rector of the seminary got up there and listed all these places, and I was like, what is he doing? And then I thought, well, why does he know all of these places?
That's true. That's true. That's the question you should have asked him.
Yeah. But the reason for putting it in the book is like, well, they knew what was going on, you know. So there was a subculture there that was very interesting, to say the least.
Say the least. Yeah. So Mario, I mean, that also reinforces the unspoken understanding that many people have when it comes to young men going to the priesthood. Uh, don't you think so?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, it's no secret that a lot of young men for many years, especially in a generation past, you know, it was a safe place to go where no one asked questions if you were gay, right? So, you know, it was just assumed that you would get married. But if you went off to the seminary, no one asked any questions. So it was a very safe haven for a lot of these young men. And but I also think, you know, it's for a lot of people, for a lot of gay men at that, you know, who have any particular religious inclination, there's this sensitivity and this need to help others when you're struggling yourself. And I think that kind of plays into this whole idea of wanting to be a priest, and then also the cover up, you know.
The cover up.
Yeah.
Okay, now on page 232, you say right here now I mean, the character says that, is everybody at NAC having sex? So that means you refer to the subculture. It seems to me that subculture is pretty strong among those this population, actually.
Well, I did a lot of research during that time, and afterwards, you know, I called a number of my friends who I've known for many years, and just asked them their experiences. So yeah, there was a subculture, and there is a subculture. People are, you know, doing all sorts of things they shouldn't be doing according to the rules.
Exactly.
And you know, so somebody's speaking on the one hand, you shouldn't be doing this, or listing off places you shouldn't go, but the reason why they know it is because they've gone themselves, you know. It was I have to say that as a young, innocent, bright-eyed seminarian myself, I was shocked by it all.
So let me ask you something, Mario. Listen, very this question tormented me after I read so many passages in the book last night. By proportion, since you do a lot of research before writing this book, by proportion, do you think that young men, young seminarians who do not espouse the feeling or at least the homosexual stirring would feel somewhat isolated or intimidated, or how? Since you can you please share that with the audience?
That's a good question. Thank you. I don't think so. I think, there was, because there is a character in the story who is straight, and he was very much a part of Miguel, right?
Miguel.
Yes. And what I wanted to show in the relationship, that these three friends, even though two of them were gay and one was straight, there was this care and love for each other, that the sexuality part of it didn't really matter, even though for a long time it was unspoken. Mm-hmm. So in my experience, I don't think that non-LGBTQ people feel isolated within that environment. I think it's just I think the subculture for the LGBTQ people is that it's a place where they finally found safety. Okay. You know, whereas outside in the real world, there was no safety. They were always questioned or beaten up or taunted. But within the confines of the seminary and the church, they found a community of people who cared for them.
So how long did it really take you to conceive this novel?
Well, it took probably about 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. I spent a good amount of time just taking notes. I'm a very, or was a very avid journaler throughout my years. I started sometime in college and I continued until about 10 years ago. And so I went back and read some of the passages of my time in Rome, and which prompted me to call a bunch of my friends, some of whom were priests, some of them left, and just ask them, what was your experience? Tell me a story. Tell me something that sticks out in your mind.
Right.
And so, I compiled all these little vignettes, and I was like, well, let me see what I can weave together and create a story that teaches a lesson. I mean, because one of the things I want is not to write scandalous books so much as write a book where these people go through, these very idealistic people go through a trial, an emotional and spiritual trial, and come out the other end, which, I think makes for good stories. So.
Exactly. I like the way you really, because your story flows, right into it. Your style is very, I would say, what I always say is the sophistication of simplicity.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I like that. And that's really was allowing me to move through it all last night. I was reading the book.
Oh, well, that's good. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, part of what I think is my style is just telling stories. I mean, I've been a teacher for, almost 30 years now. And, if you're a good teacher, in my opinion, you're telling stories to your students all the time.
All the time. Me too. Me too. All the time. Yeah.
And so that's
you in that sense, you're a great storyteller. You know how to trap someone, and keep them there. Good. That's how you're a great storyteller.
Yes.
So, when you speak to those who actually left before they, or became ordained priests, what was most of the stories that they tell? What was the main reason why they had to leave?
It's interesting. Most of the people who asked me when I left, they all assumed that it was because we wanted to have sex, and for most of us, after all these interviews, that wasn't the reason why we left. The reason why we left was because we didn't find what we were looking for when we were there. I think, especially for an idealistic young person who's going in right from college, you're expecting, each of us wanted to change the world, make it a better place, this idealism. And, it's a really harsh reality when you go in and especially when, in this case, in this story, you're going to the center of Catholicism, you're going to the power, the center of power at the Vatican, and you realize that it's an institution run by human beings, and it's flawed, just like every institution.
There are flaws, yes.
And it's very political, and there's lots of power and struggle and ambition, and for so many of us, it was so far from our simple desire to serve other people.
Exactly.
To be that ear for a person who was struggling, to be that comfort for the person who was mourning, and so many of us left because it wasn't addressing any of those.
So you felt let down or deceived?
More let down, I think.
Let down.
Yeah.
Now, so I know you might know it better than most people. The decision by Benedict XVI to step aside, something that's never done before. So was that created an uproar within the hierarchy of the Catholic Church?
Oh, absolutely. And look, we don't know why, but we can speculate. Mm-hmm. And given what the news that came out in this last week, where he actually apologized for allowing abuse to happen when he was a bishop back in Germany after the report came out, a lot of us think that that's why he stepped aside, because he knew he was in the midst of it, and but there was a sigh of relief for those of us on the more progressive side of the church, thinking that this is reform needs to happen.
Exactly.
And he was definitely not one to reform. He was one that wanted to circle the wagons, protect the church at all costs. And the victims of abuse could,
right. It was too overwhelming then.
Yes.
What do you think of this new Pope that we have now?
I think he's amazing. Look, I want him to do more, but it's like any leader, they get into position of power and they have to work within the structure. I mean, yes. I'd like him to change some of the teachings of, with regard to celibacy, with regard to LGBTQ people, and I'm hoping he will. He's changed his the way he approaches it. He's welcoming, whereas before in the other, even within the United States, LGBT people who teach in Catholic institutions are getting fired all over the country.
Really?
Because
I didn't know that.
Yes, they are, because they happen to get married legally. And so if you get married legally...
And the church disapproves of that.
Yes. And so scores of people have been fired because of that. And Francis is trying to change that. Like, we're all welcome. We're all right along the way. He isn't saying that he isn't changing the language about sin and all of that stuff, but he's saying that we're all welcome. The fact that, it's still happening and a lot in the United States is really sad. So I think Francis is trying to change the focus.
And at a time that I believe that, this is becoming more and more accepted in society, it's becoming more and more mainstream. So I think that there should be more outspoken individual within the LGBT community to attack these form of injustice, I would say. You can't fire someone just because of his sexual orientation.
Right.
Not in the 21st century.
Exactly. But see what a lot of these bishops are doing. They're getting around it because they're calling the teachers, instead of teachers, they're calling them ministers. And as long as if you label them as ministers, then they're not protected. All right. Okay. And so they could legally fire them.
They trapped them there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very sad.
Yes.
But let me ask you something, we could talk for, it's already 27 minutes since we've been talking, Yeah, time flies.
It does.
So let me ask you something here now. Who really, as a writer, inspires you the most?
Wow. Well, it's interesting. That's such back when I was in seminary, there was this writer called Hermann Hesse. And in fact, I quote, there's a passage from one of his books in Forbidden Rome, which by the way, I have right here. I just got my hardcover copy.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's pretty good though. Yeah.
But it inspired.
Got the dust jacket on it.
What's that?
The dust jacket, is it on it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
But Hermann Hesse inspired me because he wrote about this internal struggle, and this kind of wanting to do right, but the battling with the human, the flesh, the battle of the flesh and the spirit. And I remember it really speaking to me. So I think he was early on, he was one of the writers who really inspired me, because he tugged at my soul and tugged at my heart, you know.
Is he American?
He's German.
He's German? That's the name I was going to say. He's
yes. German. And, but in recent times, I'd say the Andre Aciman, who wrote Call Me By Your Name, which became a movie after.
Right.
I loved that story. And in fact, it was after I saw that movie, you know, I had read the book and then I went to see the movie and I began to think about what it was like to be a young person, trying to figure out my way within a church, an environment, because I grew up in a very religious family too, religious environment, where all the messages coming at me were telling me that I was bad and evil, and but still feeling like, knowing like in my heart, like I'm not a bad person.
After
you know?
all. Yeah. And we all have that our own little demon dwelling inside me.
Right. So so what I loved about Andre Aciman's story was that it was this just awakening, you know, like coming of age story, and it was beautiful. And I thought, I want to write about, you know, young people who are coming to terms with who they are,
exactly,
who they love.
And I can see that you've written several books on that subject.
Yes.
Okay. Now, is the next project would be also and the same theme?
Well, I have, you know, one yes and one no.
Okay.
The one that I'm actually querying now is, it is on the same theme, but I wanted it to be an epic novel that began in the 80s. And, you know, we know what happened with the LGBTQ community during the 80s and 90s when AIDS hit, you know, and I wanted it to span the whole AIDS crisis, and then come out the other end, you know, for those of us who survived it, you know. So hopeful, you know, happy at the end, but having gone through the trial. So that's definitely one I'm querying now. And then next, you know, the other one is totally different. The other book is about my parents' love story. So it's Letters from Italy, and that comes out on the 24th of this month. So 24th.
I can easily say that you are Italian American, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because the character Anthony also has relatives in Rome and all that.
Yes. Yeah. You know, and you know, and I'm first generation. My parents were born and raised in Italy. They came here as adults, so I grew up in a very ethnic household. You know,
exactly, and also speaking dual languages too.
Yes.
Just like my children in the house, we would be speaking in Creole and also in English.
Yes.
Developed something called Quiglish, which is mixing Creole and English together, you know, which Absolutely. Is pretty common among Haitian Americans, by the way.
Yes.
But since you teach music also, Mario, right?
I do.
Okay, so if I were to ask you, who if you were to choose between, let's say, American pop culture and I would say our classical music, I would say. So which one you think you would consider?
Well, okay. So as a music teacher, I am very eclectic in my tastes. I have everything from pop to jazz to Broadway to classical in my life. I have it all, you know. But I do gravitate. I'm a choir director, so I love choir music of all sorts. I love the classics. Right now, I'm teaching my choir some Vivaldi, but I have a great choir, and I love we do a lot of gospel music and spirituals, and so I mean, if you ever came to one of my concerts, you'd have to shake
probably
your head.
when my wife and I fly to New York, we'll probably try to squeeze in one of yours.
I would love that.
Let's touch the subject to food right now. Every time I have an author in the conversation, we always switch from literature into something cozier. And I remember one of the first few authors was an Italian American also. She married a gentleman from Canada, I would say, or at least Canadian origin. But she loves pasta. And she says her husband doesn't love it, but she's not shy about it. She has it every time, So is that the same thing with you too, Mario?
Absolutely. And I have to say that we just this morning, my husband and I made homemade ravioli. So
okay. Okay. So you can't really you have to have it.
I would have it every day if I could. Every single day I'd have pasta.
That's interesting.
And I love to cook. So one of the things I learned when I was studying in Rome was how to cook an entirely different cuisine than my mother. So, I would ask the chef, like, how did you make this? I've never had this pasta carbonara before, or amatriciana, and tell me. So I love to cook and I love to eat. Okay. But not just pasta. I have to say that I'm very adventurous. I love foods of all different types, so.
Okay. Since you live in New York, you've never been to a Haitian restaurant in New York, no?
I have. I don't remember the names because I never know what the names of these restaurants are that I just happened upon. But yes. And I've had Haitian students whose mothers always think I'm too skinny and bring me food.
They do. That's sort of the Haitian culture, We love that food. And I have to keep my wife at bay sometimes,
Oh, no, I love that. I'm always like, oh, okay, I'll take it. And I do like spicy foods too. And so I always ask for them to put a little bit extra spice.
All right, Mario, if there's my last question, if anybody who would want to follow your path, at becoming a writer and focusing on very pertinent theme of, teaching people, bringing awareness about the life of the LGBT community. So what advice would you give that person?
I would say that the most important thing is to be honest. Be honest in the writing. Don't write to entertain. If you are going to draw people in, write a story that is authentic and don't be preachy, because everybody's journey is their own. And you can only speak from your journey. And so, there are so many issues with the LGBTQ community that as it continues to evolve and young people come through, their experiences are very different than mine as an old person who went through it decades ago. But our stories are always filled with struggle in some way, struggle for acceptance. And so be authentic, don't be preachy, and write what you believe is true, not what somebody else is going to tell you to write.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So with that, I'm just going to say it's been more than a pleasure to have this wonderful, constructive, and intellectual conversation with author, prolific writer, Mario Del Olio.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to spend an evening. Thank you.
Okay.